Good evening, everyone, and welcome to UN Pathways. I'm Jason Scorza, the Vice Provost for International Education, and I'm delighted to see so many of you in the audience today. On a beautiful spring day, you could be out frolicking, or whatever precedes or immediately follows frolicking, but you've chosen instead to pursue matters of politics, matters of diplomacy, and of course matters of the mind, and I commend you. For those of you who are new to the UN Pathways program, our program this evening will take the form of a discussion between Ambassador Ahmad Kamal and Ambassador Enrique Armando Román-Morey. I believe that Ambassador Kamal has brought the instruments of torture and is prepared in his usual cruel and cunning way to take advantage of the knowledge and wisdom of our guest. Their discussion will be followed by questions and answers, and then we will, of course, adjourn. So without further ado, I would like to, oh, no, there is one more thing. For those of you who are new to this program, if you move around, it makes a lot of noise and makes it very difficult for the microphones to pick up the voices of our speakers. So if you do need to move around, I would ask you to do so very quietly, and also to turn off any phones, beepers, buzzers, or other devices that might be in your possession. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Román-Morey, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. Welcome to Fairleigh Dickinson. And a double welcome, because I know that you have been very busy with the First Lady of Peru, who's in town.
This morning.
And so the fact that you have still found time to join us at Fairleigh Dickinson is a matter of gratification for us. This is the fullest audience that I have seen in this room in all the years that we have been doing these UN Pathways events. And I can only presume that this is because nobody knows anything about Peru. And so they all want to learn about Peru. They don't even know where Peru is. And so they are fascinated by your presence as a stranger in the paradise, which is Fairleigh Dickinson University. And so I want to ask you, first and foremost, what makes Peru tick? Because we know only one thing about Peru, and that is that it is full of potatoes. And that it invented the potato and is therefore the patron saint of McDonald's. But other than that, are you worthy of anything else other than potatoes also? Other than the 380 varieties of potatoes that you have in Peru? What else is there in Peru?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much. I see that my good old friend, Ambassador Kamal, has brought his weapons with him. And, but I am a seasoned diplomat, and I've learned from him my path in this kind of job. Yes, Peru has some things, some good things besides potato. But we really wish that we would have registered internationally with the, I don't know, the WIPO, the potato. We would have been the billionaires of billionaires in the world just by selling hamburgers, bad hamburgers, and good potatoes. But anyway, the Peru is much more than potatoes. Yes, you're right. Potato comes from the lands of Peru, from the higher Andes. And that's what makes our people in that part of the world poor, but never hunger. You just kick the soil and you get food in that magic land that we have. With that, I can tell you that Peru has many other things to offer, a millennium culture with the pre-Incas, 3,000 before Christ. The Incas And of course, this fantastic mixture of races that we have in Peru, coming from 300 years of Spanish people in my country. I'm sure that what Ambassador Kamal mentioned, that you don't know even where Peru is a total mistake, with all due respect, Mr. Ambassador. But I'm sure you know that Peru has been the center of the culture in Latin America. The big Spaniard, they say discovery, I would say invasion, 500 years ago, put us in the western part of the world. But really what they found was a very rich culture, which were already doing high architectures, high architectonic figures. They were doing some medical things that no one still can explain up to date. We have art, and we had music, and of course food. One of the main, I would say, miracles in this new Peru of development is that we have breaking all the borders, and now the Peruvian food is a la mode. You can find it everywhere. So again, Mr. Ambassador, we have much more than potatoes. And of course, I could have keep on talking and saying what we have, like very good, and I would say very serious diplomacy. I know that you are students, most of you, or perhaps some of you, of political science and diplomacy. As you know, Peru is the only Latin American country which has not only given the potato, but also a Secretary General of the United Nations, Javier Pérez de Cuellar. And he was the 5th Secretary General of the United Nations, and he was not chosen because he was a nice guy, but because he was one of the best diplomats around the world. So yes, here I am to talk about Peru and the new Peru which is coming forward.
You know that my wife and I visited Peru because I did not know where was Peru, but my wife was very keen to visit it, and we were surprised at some of the things that we learned. Among the funny things was that I found that the potato in Peru is frozen. Fresh potatoes are frozen and therefore serve as a food throughout the year.
Yes.
And that is something that we don't do anywhere else in the world. But it is totally normal in Peru to take potatoes and press them and freeze them as food. But other than that, there are some remarkable things in Peru. The Inca heritage of Peru and the complete mystery of that heritage, whether it is Machu Picchu or the roads in Peru or the manner in which the Incas were able to govern, was a remarkable part of history. And yet, the Incas were wiped out by the Spaniards. And so, what is your judgment about what the Spaniards did to Peru?
I always like to see the part of history in which the Spanish arrived in 1500 to Peru as a positive issue. I am 11 generations Peruvian, very Peruvian. My family came with the Spaniards to Peru, and they gave us culture, part of the European culture in that part of the world. They gave us the language. It's a most spoken language in the region in Latin America. They gave us religion. They gave us a mixture of what is the best. The Peruvian, I was mentioning before, the Peruvian race is not one kind. You can do a great, I would say, how do you say, abanico, how do you say, with us, fan of the Spanish fan. You can open it and find from the Oriental cultures and races who visited and stayed in Peru since more than 200 years ago, not only the Spaniards 500 years ago. Then we had the Europeans, and of course we have the Africans. This mixture of races and cultures is what makes Peru, I would say, kind of unique country in the region. We have music, we have literature. We have lately a Nobel Literature Prize with Mario Vargas Llosa. We have I don't know, so many things, but mainly I'm fond of, and as a diplomat that I am, a career diplomat, who has had the chance of living, I would say, all around the world, who have served in 3 different continents, 14 countries, and I visited 82 capitals. That means the whole world that we can find. I can say that Peru is one of those countries which deserve to be visited, deserve to be, like your wife took you there. I invite you all to go to Peru sometime. Take your time, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it, from any kind and from any point of view.
One of the many funny things that we found in Peru was the profusion of Chinese restaurants. And you have a name for these Chinese restaurants, the Chifas.
Chifa.
What's wrong with you? You don't like your own food?
No, we're trying to teach the Chinese how to eat good Chinese food. The Chifa is the name of all the restaurants who serves Chinese food. Chinese came 180, 200 years ago to Peru to work first in the cotton fields, and then they tried to put them to work in the mine fields, which was not a good idea, because Chinese race, not today, but in that time, they were short, not too much lungs, and if you want to live in 4,000 meters high up, you need good lungs. So the Chinese stayed in Peru. So what they did laundries, because I think there are much more Chinese in New York than in Peru. But anyway, laundries and good Chifas, restaurants. Chifa, it's a mixture. It's a mixture between the Chinese, very fantastic, good Chinese food, and the Peruvian food. And it makes a special kind. We have a Chinatown in Lima. Lima is a big city. If you don't know it, Lima is it's an 8 million people city. And we have a Chinatown, but similar to the one, not to the one in New York with our big stores and second-hand things. But what you find in Lima, it's really a Chinatown, like in San Francisco. A Chinatown which you can find restaurants, where you can find decoration, everything in China. And there are 6 newspapers, 6 daily newspapers, which are being sold. 2 pages, but in different Chinese languages, from Beijing to Kanpai, everywhere, from everywhere. So it's part of our culture now, but part of this mixture. Chinese, Japanese. We even already had the Japanese president, Fujimori-san. So we had a Japanese. Now he's in jail, but anyway, he was a president. And as a matter of fact, I think that's another thing that Peru has given to the world. We put in jail the crooks. We put in jail the crooks, even if they are presidents or not. They are not untouchables like any other place. So I think that's a good example.
I think we in Pakistan have to learn that from you.
I can organize some seminars.
Okay, but the other fantastically unusual thing that we saw was the Nazca lines.
Oh, fantastic, yeah.
And these are unbelievably gigantic structures on the ground, made with stones. And for all my study, nobody could tell me who made these Nazca lines and when and why? Because there are books which have been written about it which say that these were aliens who came from outer space and made them. Now, are you a subscriber to the aliens in Peru theory?
Really, not so much, but they're my friends. You know, Nazca lines. They are based in Nazca, south of Lima, 300 kilometers. The Nazca lines, and let me correct you, Ahmed. They are not structures.
Yeah, but
They are
stone.
just figures on the sand. In the sand, you have these figures, lines, which have been studied by scientists and special people going there, that you can see only from high altitudes. You can take a helicopter or a small plane, and you can fly above these lines. What makes it so special is that there are huge monumental figures, like an ant, like a monkey, like a fish, that it's not possible to imagine that a human could draw in such without having modern apparatus, without having modern science and technology. But there they are. And what makes it really, really special is that in spite that hundreds of years has passed and many people have walked throughout, they're still there. You can see them. There is even one chandelier, one candle, which is the chandelier of the Jew. It's the seven.
Eight candles.
Exact, 8 candles. So no one can. Yes, and there is a theory that perhaps aliens came to Peru. I don't know. I might be an alien.
Yes, but then the mystery of Peru continues, because the same thing is true of Machu Picchu also. Here is a city up in the mountains. It is difficult to get there. Even today, it takes a lot of courage to get there with modern transport, because it's not easy. Who were these people and why were they hiding up in the mountains? Who were they hiding from to build a place like that so high on the mountains?
The Inca Empire was the strongest empire in the region. By history, it says that in the time there were 10 million Incas population, the Inca Empire, that covered the whole region except the Amazon basin, which was from Brazil. The rest was Peru. Peru, the first line of geographical distribution of Peru started in Venezuela next to Panama and ended in Tierra del Fuego in Argentina. All of that was Peru, was the land of the Incas. Then the new ideas of freedom and Bolívares and San Martins came, and we had this division between Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, everything, Bolivia. Bolivia was until 1800 part of Peru. It's El Alto Peru, it was called. But that was the empire of the Incas. So, and they, in the case of Machu Picchu, it is a citadel. It is a huge, massive construction. And you're right. Something which has no explanation is that there are no rocks of that size in that part of the Andes. In that specific part of the Andes, you don't find rocks of that size. Nevertheless, in Machu Picchu, in Sacsayhuaman, which is 3,000 meters high, you find these fantastic rocks, perfectly carved one to another, put one on top of the other without needing to have a glue in between. So that's what makes it so, I don't know, perhaps I'm an alien.
Yes, because what fascinated us was the fact that these rocks are huge.
Huge.
And they are not easy to push around because they are literally the size of this wall.
And the Incas didn't know the will.
But they are
makes it more
perfectly carved. And the Incas do not appear to have had any tools. How did they do this without tools? Because there was no iron tools in the Inca times. So they were using sand to polish rocks. It's a very time-consuming concept.
But it was time-consuming, but worth it, because it was left there for humanity.
And the other place that you mentioned, we referred to it as sexy woman because that's what it sounded like. You called it something else.
What?
Sexy woman.
Did I?
Yes. the
Sexy woman. Gracias.
It still sounds like sexy woman to me.
That's a good. I put it in my records, okay, and I call it sexy woman from now on. A Machu Picchu.
Okay, then now I'm again interested in the fact that Peru was Greater Peru. And all these countries, which were greater empires, which were then later on cut up into smaller fragments. This is incidentally exactly what happened in the Middle East with Syria. The fact that you have been cut up into smaller fragments means that we have to be interested in your relationship with those fragments. What is the relationship between Peru and Bolivia, Peru and Ecuador, Peru and Venezuela, Peru and Chile? How do you get along with these people who originally were part of you but are now independent countries?
But that reminds me of a joke of a guy who is in the getting a haircut, and then he stands up and start hitting the guy, the guy who's doing the haircut, hit him, say, "What are you doing?" He said, you know he's a Spanish guy. I said, and so? But he took our princesses and our girls and changed it for little mirrors. I said, but that happened 500 years ago. And he said, oh, I just learned about it. So this is it. This is what we have to avoid. Things happen. That's history. You say, how do we manage to get along with these parts that used to be Peru? It's part of the history. I mean, Europe, what was Europe? Bunch of people fighting to each other, no divisions. What was Europe? I mean, I'm talking about some 1,000 years ago. All of them. You mentioned Syria, right? You mentioned Iraq. So the big old cultures that were the base for what we have now, the modern world. I mean, the ones you had in the Middle East, now you had also in Latin America. In Latin America, there were, I would say, 3 great cultures: the Incas, the Mayas, and the Aztecs. Incas in Peru and all that part of South America, Mayas in Central America, and Aztecs in Mexico and southern United States. So those were the 3 great cultures in Peru. There are signs that they were special envoys from the Aztecs when they learned that there was another big empire in the south. There are signs and there are records, historic records, that they sent special envoys, ambassadors from the actual Mexico to actual Peru. Of course, these guys never arrived because it's a huge. You said these small pieces, big countries. My country, you don't fly it in, you don't cross it. I mean, the line of coast in Peru is about 2,200 kilometers in line, and the territory is more than 2 million square kilometers. So that's a big country.
Yes,
and most of our countries are big, with a couple of exceptions.
But, Mr. Ambassador, you are not answering my question. My question was, what is your relationship?
Very good.
And you have deliberately tried to steer away from answering the question.
Yes, I know.
I want to know, what is your relationship with Venezuela? What is your relationship with Bolivia? What is your relationship with Chile?
To start with, we have a common history. Having a common history, common language, common religion, we have very good relations. We have to live together. That's how we see. Again, if I put the example, Europe, when you go to a country where I lived many, many years, Switzerland, where they have 4 languages, because they were made out of small pieces of all Central Europe. Or if you go to former Yugoslavia, where I lived, and let me tell you one thing. When I was posted in Yugoslavia, and that goes not to avoid your question, the first thing I read was a book called We the Yugoslavs. I'm talking Yugoslavia when Tito was still alive in the 80s, Marshal Tito. This book started with a phrase which really struck me, which said, what is Yugoslavia? It's one country with 2 alphabets, with 3 religions, with 4 languages, with 5 nationalities, with 6 republics, and then then what is Yugoslavia? Now you can see what is Yugoslavia. 7 countries, all separated. The good old Yugoslavia centered in Belgrade is not anymore. Now it's Serbia without a coast. So we are not separated. We are getting united more and more. We have our problems. We deal with our problems in Latin America. But what are we doing to get along? We have the Andean group, which puts together all the countries of the region. We have the UNASUR, which is all the countries of South America. In this case, Peru is the president pro tempore. We have recently created CELAC. CELAC es la Comunidad de Estados Latinoamericanos, which is OAS without United States and Canada. We have OAS, which was the first regional organization created in the world. Now we have League of Arab States, but the first one, the oldest, is OAS, Organization of American States. So that's America. We are just a different kind of breed.
Yeah, but you are a very, I acknowledge that you are a very accomplished diplomat. Your answer basically is, we get along well, because this is history. You know, I've been married to my wife for 50 years, but we still don't get along well. And so the mere fact that you have had history which is long is no proof of getting along well. And the fact that you belong to common organizations, I want you to tell me what are the problems in Latin America. Because surely you have border disputes, surely there are countries which would like to have greater access to the sea. Surely these are problems which exist.
Yes, and
what are you doing to solve those problems?
Let's start. First of all, with your 50 years in your marriage with your wife. We have to give a decoration to her just to having supported you 50 years. So that's to start with. Secondly, we are good friends. That's why we can joke on this. Secondly, you know, yes, having these institutions, having these organizations, it's what makes the possibility of always keeping the dialogue. Yes, we have border problems, less and less. For instance, Peru and Chile had a problem in a piece of the coast. We have requested the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, to go and do a fair and just decision. We're waiting. Next month, perhaps in the month of May, perhaps in the month of June, we will have a final solution, and both governments and both countries and both people have decided to accept whatever comes as a reaction will be the final word. I wish that means choosing the peaceful ways and means to find solutions to common problems. The problem which is pendent historically is Bolivia, with no way out to the sea. So it's a landlocked state. Bolivia is now requesting possibly to go to the International Court of Justice, and it might be that its case is accepted. We don't know yet. We don't know yet. The case is that Bolivia lost the coastal side in the war against Chile, who won the war, of course, and the history is always written by victors and not by losers. In this case, Chile won the war, took a part of the territory of Bolivia and part of the territory of Peru. But we continue. That's history. We have to live and build upon the history.
One of the fascinating things about Latin America is a sort of a dividing line between right-wing and left-wing thought, political thought in the region. And so you have some countries which are very socialist and some countries which are very feudal. And so how do you see that emerging line, or what do you think is the development of political thought in Latin America? Is it a continent which is slowly turning towards the left, or is it a continent which is going to turn towards the right? And I ask that because in most countries of Latin America, there is a wide difference between the super rich and the super poor. And that is always a dangerous situation because it requires change. And that change can be either violent or it can be politically progressive. How do you see the progress or the trend of political thought in Latin America?
Political thought in Latin America, as you said, it has been historically on the left or on the right streams normally. But now the trend right now is to go to the middle. They are going to the middle and trying to find common ways of living together. We have countries, socialist countries or communist countries like Cuba. I was ambassador to Cuba. I know that country very well. It's one of my preferred countries, and I really love the Cuban people. Might like or not Fidel Castro, but the Cuban people is one of those fantastic group of persons that you can find in the world. I was there, I lived there, my children grew up in part of their life in Cuba, so I can tell you that without any kind of prejudice. We have countries like the ALBA group, you know, who are followers of Cuba, like Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador. Yes, but we have other countries that like Peru, Colombia, Chile, Argentina, which are trying to struggle together to get out. You mentioned something which is very important. The problems in our continent is the big gap between extreme poverty and extreme wealth. That's the big problem in our region. If you open the list of Forbes, you can find 100 billionaires from Latin America, Brazilians, Argentinians, couple of Peruvians, and of course Mexicans. The richest man in the world is a Mexican. One of the poorest people in the world is Mexico. So that's a reality. But that's why we're struggling to fight against those differences between one side and the other one. Peru, and I can talk about my country, it's one of those examples in which we have had the last 15 years a very steady growth, economic growth, more than 6 to 7% yearly, which is very high for international standards. We have been growing even fastest than China in a couple of years. What is the miracle? There is no miracle. It's just we are a rich country. There is a description by Ricardo Palma, a writer from Peru, who said that Peru is a pauper sitting in a golden bench. Es un pobre sentado en una banca de oro. And that's it. We're rich. We're a very rich country. What we're learning is to use that wealth in our favor. Before, we used to just grab, this is gold, this is silver, this is petroleum, this is whatever, and we sold it as it was. Now we're producing our own produces in all the regions, in all the parts of the region. I didn't mention one latest, I would say, organization which is making lots of positive noise in the world, which is called the Alianza del Pacífico. Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile. Those four economies are really strong, I would say, machinery to push the rest of the economy of that part of Latin America, because Brazil is a different thing, by number of population, by number of wealthness, by richness, by, I don't know, it's already, it's a different thing, by development in some very important fields like science and technology that we're lacking still in this part of South America. But that's what we're doing now. And of course that puts you in the trend. I mean, political dreamers, you hardly find them. Political users, you do find them. Political dreamers, Che Guevara. Yes, everybody had. When I was studying in university, I had a Che Guevara picture in my room, big Che Guevara. And my mother was a very Catholic lady. And one day he said, "Who's that guy?" I said, "It's a new picture of Jesus Christ." And she just went, because she didn't know who was that guy, But of course, I was in the university, I was a young guy, everybody was thinking Che Guevara as a great fighter, but from a very romantic way of thinking. Reality is a different thing, and reality is what is pushing us in America, in Latin America especially, to come out of these differences between extreme poverty and extreme wealthiness. We now have the extreme poverty has been reduced in my country in the last 5 years in more than 20%. Now we started in 30-something percent. The extreme poverty now in Peru is less than 10%. We have poor people, yes, we do.
Let's turn for a minute to the United Nations, where you are a very prominent ambassador.
Thank you.
I think for years you have been conducting a jihad against me, trying to convince me that nuclear non-proliferation is good. And you haven't convinced me yet. So what are your interests at the United Nations? I know that NPT is one of your major interests at the United Nations.
Thank you very much for the question, Ambassador. No, I know that I'm not going to convince you, and I give you the reason. You have the weapon. Once you have it, that's it. Once you have it, you feel very strong guy. So that's the difference. Anyway, again, I go back to Latin America.
You don't want people to feel strong?
No, not with nuclear weapons. You don't need to. Take vitamins. What I can tell you is that go back to Latin America. Latin America, and he just touched something that really touched on me. I'm one of those diplomats that had been blessed, I would say, having been in many countries and having had the chance of working in different fields of the United Nations. Latin America gave to the world something that's still going on and is growing, the nuclear weapon-free zones. In 1960s, when the crisis of the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1961-62, Latin America decided that without being part of the conflict between the White House and the White Bear in the Soviet Union, we were going to be anyhow touched by if a nuclear war would have developed. So we invented, that was an invention in international law, the nuclear weapon-free zone, the decision by sovereign countries to sign a treaty not to possess, to produce, to have, to trade the nuclear weapon. So the nuclear weapon is totally banned from America, Latin America. From Rio Grande to Patagonia, all the countries are members of Tlatelolco Treaty, which is the treaty of nuclear ban treaty in the region. You mentioned the NPT. The NPT came right after Tlatelolco. It's younger than Tlatelolco. Tlatelolco was the first treaty of that kind. The NPT is the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Big difference. OPANAL is the Organization for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. That means prohibition. NPT is a non-proliferation. That means I have it, I don't want you to have it. That's a big difference. That is the main difference between one and the other one. I'm telling you, because tomorrow, in less than 24 hours, I'm flying to Geneva because I've been elected president of the next MPT meeting. So that's why perhaps I'm going to be chairing the third PrepCom of MPT. I know you don't know what's MPT, but I will teach you later. So yes, Latin America has given very, very much to this issue of disarmament, which is in my blood, I would say. After being in Tlatelolco, I was also invited by Kofi Annan, and I had the honor to represent my region as the Undersecretary General for Disarmament Affairs in Geneva, head of the Disarmament Office. So I dealt those moments in which you tested, in which India tested, in which...
no, India tested and then we tested.
You're right. India tested long time ago, besides. Long time ago. Yes, sir.
Chronology must be correct.
All right. So pre-Incas are before the Incas, right? All right, but yes, I worked for 5 years, 6 years over there, and I had the chance of being inside this big whale, white whale, Moby Dick, which is trying to fight for human safety, human security, and I am a true believer that we don't need the nuclear weapon. Sometimes I will convince you.
Yes, but the problem is that if you do not believe in the nuclear weapon, then you have to be talking about nuclear disarmament.
Yes.
And nuclear non-proliferation is a totally different concept because it is discriminatory. As you yourself said, it means mine are good, yours are not good. Mm-hmm. I don't see how yours are good and mine are not good. Because the minute you begin talking of two levels of goodness, then you will get proliferation. And that is what has happened.
Exactly.
We have been arguing for nuclear disarmament for 40 years. But people are not willing to give up their nuclear weapons. And so, why are you looking at me all the time? Why don't you look at the nuclear weapon states? Why don't you talk to the United States about giving up nuclear weapons?
Because you're closer. But anyway.
Yeah, what do you...
to me. No, the thing is that the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, is very clear. Article 6 demands for nuclear disarmament on the way to a nuclear weapon-free world. But NPT also has other articles very important, like Article 4, which talks about the peaceful uses of nuclear weapon. And countries like yours or like mine, we are totally in favor of peaceful uses of nuclear energy, but without having the nuclear weapons. I agree with you that this discriminatory process has created the proliferation. North Korea has already tested. We know it's a nuclear nuclear weapon possessor, and some other country will come and they do it behind it, below the table, under the table. That's how they do it, because that's the only way to do it. If you don't want to go against the whole international society, and yes, we continue. I said it. I'm a total believer in nuclear disarmament. And that's what I do. I mean, and the way to get to nuclear disarmament is to get first to nuclear non-proliferation.
I have one final question before we open it to the floor for questions from the floor. You have a heritage behind you in your DNA, in which the Incas were important because they were an empire which constructed remarkable things, including roads and a system of transport and exchange of information, etc. And the ability to handle stone blocks without tools, which is absolutely remarkable. What I want to know is, what is the heritage of the Incas which is relevant to Peru today? Are you still an Inca or not? Can you speak Quechua or not? Where is Quechua? I know that you've been hijacked by the Spaniards to speak Spanish, but where is the Quechua language in Peru today? And where is your DNA and your heritage?
My DNA is in the sands of the Pacific, in the high mountains of the Andes, and in the green part of the Amazon. That's my DNA. After 12 generations, I feel very, very Peruvian. And I tell you, yes, the heritage from the Incas is exactly that. The Incas were an empire, but they were not aggressive. They were not warriors. And perhaps that's why they were taken so easily by the Spaniards. The Incas developed an incredible chain, as you mentioned, of roads, communication inside all these territories, but mainly developed a system of education. They never fought to get a territory. When they went to the high El Alto Peru, the part which is, there's a different race there. It's not Inca, it's Aymara. And the Aymaras were how do you say, taken over by the Incas by the way of the Amautas, the teachers, the educators that came and said, okay, now we're going to teach you. It was a different culture. And if I have that kind of DNA, I'm very proud to have that. I mean, peace and education makes the world.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand you over to the provost for questions from the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador Kamal. As I wait for, well, let's see a show of hands. Who would like to ask a question? We'll go 1, 2, 3, and then see what happens. When you get the microphone, please. No, you can't. It's not permitted. When you get the microphone, stand up, introduce yourself, and ask your question. So we're starting the second one.
Well, my name is Antonio Concepcion. I'm studying in Gate to the Future. It's an excellent program. I appreciate it a lot, giving a lot of opportunity for people who don't speak English or is not fluent in English. Well, this is very interesting. You have a good friend there. He treats you very good. You cannot complain about him. We talk about many things, heritage, whatever. You're an Inca. That's the way that I see you. Yeah. Because the heritage of all the good things that we can see in those, in the Inca people. You have music, excellent music.
Fantastic.
You got fantastic food, ceviche. It's great. Inca had, if you see Inca's empire and you see Persia, any other empire, you see they have, in this part of the world, with not connection, apparently, with those, they have.
Apparently, you say.
Apparently, we don't even know because we got the Bering Stretch. We don't know if somebody passed there. But they have a lot of things. Roman has a very nice structures of communication, like road. Inca has one, very good. Signal. They had signal to show when the road was not good for military and for most of the other population. Let's go to this part. What is the main factor in your country? We have heard about that. Main factor is very interesting. And the other question is, you as an ambassador representing your country in this world now, what is happening in South America is everybody put eyes on there. Venezuela and all the country around the ALBA. What happened with Peru? Peru is with the other side, Mexico, Colombia. Why you're not in the other side too? What's going on? Thank you.
Where are you from, Antonio?
Dominican Republic.
By your last name, I realized you were Dominican. Shall I answer? We just
Yeah,
group.
take it.
Thank you for your question, first of all, and thank you for calling me Inca. I really makes me proud. makes me proud. What happens with Peru? Peru is located, the actual Peru, I mean, the actual since last century. The actual Peru is located in a very special geographical part of South America. It has only coastal side to the Pacific, but being to the Pacific, we are one of the richest fisheries countries in the world. Again, blessed. Fishery is one of the big industries in my country. And that's why we are not part of the Law of the Sea Convention. We have the 200 miles territorial sea. We don't have 12 and 188 as the convention says. We have the 200 miles by law. Peru is located in the center of this part of South America with, as I mentioned, the Pacific on one side, you have the high Andes, and then the Amazon basin. The Amazon is born and flows from Peru, crosses Brazil, and goes all the way to that Amazon basin, even to Venezuela, even to Bolivia. But it starts in Peru. The big rivers like Ucayali and Marañón get together, and you see this huge river. My mother is from that part of Peru. This huge river, there are some spaces in which you don't see the coast, the other part, it's a river, but you don't see it. You don't see the other coast of the river. So it's a very rich nature that we have in Peru. We have interconnections, roads interconnection. There was another institution created at the beginning of this century, which is called IRSA, the Inter-American for making roads communications, not only ways, but also different kind of communications. And we already are connected from the Atlantic to the Pacific or vice versa. By trains, roads, we are connected. So yes, the natural markets for a country like Brazil or Uruguay or Argentina is that part of the world, Africa and Europe. The natural markets for us is Asia. And as you said, I have at home a little dog which is called Perrochino in Peru, which is hairless, totally hairless, except here in the crest and the pads, you know. It's a beautiful dog. And if you open the millenarian tombs of the Incas, you will find skeletons of those dogs. They were there. How they arrived, why they are called perrochinos, I don't know. Dogs from China, I really don't know. But this is what you just mentioned. Yes, we have this possibility of having a wide range of connections. We are not bi-oceanic like Colombia or like Panama. You know, it's or some countries in Central America, but we are not bi-oceanic.
So you're not in trouble with the ALBA, right?
With the?
ALBA.
Not really in trouble. We might not confess the same things, but we are not in trouble. We work together. We try. They have their own way of seeing the world actually, and we have a different world. I mean, now we see what really worries us in Venezuela. This situation actually is that there is no social, how do you say, levantamiento.
Consensus.
Yeah, rising, social rising. But on the other hand, it's the decision of the Venezuelan people to elect whoever they want. It's like the Peruvians elected Humala or before Fujimori, who is in jail.
Let's go to the next question.
My name is Moises Corilloquia, soon to be alumni of here. I have 3 issues that I would like to discuss, considering what you said. What do you think is, first, you mentioned about Incas and all stuff. What do you think is where do you think the relationship between people from the capital or people who are of mixed descendants and the Andean people, where do you think that relationship will go in the future? Because from what I know and from what I've experienced, Quechua is not being taught in schools. Quechua actually is a language that is not being represented fairly in the social tissue of the country, because actually not only few people speak Quechua, but also the problem is that Quechua is not a socially recognized language. If you speak Quechua, you tend to be looked down upon. Another issue that you discussed was about inequality. What do you think about the inequalities that are plaguing Peru and that gave rise to such things as Sendero Luminoso, the Shining Path? I understand that even though Peru is a great country and is going well, inequality is rising up. Actually, the Gini index compared to 10 years ago, it's going up. Actually, it's about to be 0.5, which is a lot considering the Gini index. A third issue that I was thinking about was you seem to defend a lot the issue of non-proliferation, but I was wondering why the United States doesn't get into Iran or North Korea. Don't we have to think that because of nuclear weapons, the security and the stability of those countries, even though they may not agree with the United States policy in the world, are secure? Why cannot Peru have the possibility of having a nuclear weapon? Thank you.
Can I take that second question of yours? Because I think you must bear in mind that the growth of inequality, or what is called the gap, is not a Peruvian problem. It's a problem which is universal. And it exists most of all here in the United States, because the gap as it exists in the United States is far greater than in other parts. But this concept of the gap is spreading around the world. It worries us because it exists in China now. It exists in China is a communist country, but the gap has grown in China. It has grown in Russia. It has grown everywhere in the world. And so your question is legitimate in that if the gap is growing, obviously there will be a reaction from the public sooner or later. And that reaction is what we have to plan for. I have understood.
May I just make a point on that?
Yeah.
Because actually in Peru, the discourse is everything is going well.
No.
But I don't want, no. That's a general discourse.
I know, but in the
in
United States, in the United States, no, just a minute. In the United States, everybody says everything is going well, but we know it is the job of an ambassador to say everything is going well. An ambassador has to earn his salary, and that is why he is paid by his government to project the best image of the country. And so you should not be too critical.
I am doing my job as well, as you may understand. I'm asking questions.
Yes.
I think it is my right as well to ask questions. I know he's been paid by my government, but it's fair for me also to ask questions, I think. And I just wanted to point something, because that's the discourse that I was saying, everything is going well. But considering, for example, a couple of issues that happened maybe 1 or 2 years ago, because actually the National Statistics Institute in my country changed the pattern or the system of measuring poverty, for example. And that leads to...
We invented that trick in this country.
Yeah, we all do that.
I'd like to get in between the ambassador and his attorney, Dr. Kamal, and give you a chance to respond.
His other two questions.
May I answer? First of all, on the economic situations, I'm glad to find some Peruvians in this, especially speaking so better English than Quechua, I suppose. Right? I'm correct or not?
Well, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
Well, I don't know. I'm asking you.
I prefer not to answer.
Okay. Anyway, Yes, where's Quechua? Quechua is an official language of your country, as you know it. It's an official language, it's in the law. Quechua, it's not anymore. The question in Peru is not that it was not racism, it was classism, which is worst. And we inherited that from the Spaniards. The classes, the economical classes and the social classes were the ones who really destroyed. You ask about Sendero Luminoso. I tell you why we had Sendero Luminoso. Because we have this strange marriage between culture and education and academia, like the second oldest university in America, in Ayacucho, and hunger. Put those things together and you create powder. That's my way of seeing things. And the solution was that we had an internal. We did not import Sendero Luminoso. It was a national movement inside. I don't know if you lived in those times in Peru. I lived in part in Peru and part outside.
I lived all the time in Peru, so I know.
Yes.
I know.
Yeah. You lived in Peru.
I live in Peru, yes.
And you're going to be graduated shortly, right? From here.
Yes.
So you'll be here at least for 3-4 years.
Are you Peruvian or are you
No, he's
Pakistani?
No.
You sound like a Pakistani to me. Only Pakistanis fight like this.
I've been living here for 3 years, almost 5.
Well, I congratulate you because you have no accent when you speak English, and that's not so.
Now, normally
that's not so easy.
we would allow someone to defend themselves against the accusation of being Pakistani. On this occasion,
But in
I'd like to move the conversation along with your permission. Okay, let's go to the gentleman in the back.
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Cardona, and my question is, when you stated that races and culture makes Peru interesting, what exactly about culture makes Peru interesting? Because you...
I didn't get the word.
Speak
what
louder.
Oh, okay. I apologize. When you stated that races and culture makes Peru interesting, what exactly about the culture makes Peru interesting? Because you specifically elaborated on how music, along with many other things, makes Peru interesting. But what are those many other things pertaining to the subheading of culture alone?
What are the cultural
Because
things
you-
in
because,
Peru which make Peru interesting, other than the ones
Yes.
that you've mentioned?
Others are the one that I mentioned.
Yes.
Well, as
You
I-
kept stating that there were many other things. I want to know, other than music, because every country has their own entertainment.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just want to know Peru's way.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, there are many things. Like as you said it, like any other country, we have our own, say, box of good things that we can show to the world. First of all, it's a country in which, in spite that there is this classism, this racial classism, we have a society which has been living for centuries with Chinese, Japanese, African Americans, very few from Middle East, not too many from Europe, as in Argentina or in Uruguay or in Chile. But it's a country of melange. It's a melange. It's a group of races that have made the country and the region. What makes it so special? I think that having a very old academia, the universities of Peru are the 2 oldest in America. The Lima, and in Ayacucho. What makes it so interesting? I think everywhere. I mentioned at the beginning that I've been lucky to be in 82 countries, and I found and I lived in countries which are totally different. I started my career in Switzerland. I finished last time in Switzerland, but I lived also in Italy. I lived also in Bolivia. I lived in Egypt. I lived in Yugoslavia in the time of the Communist Party, and I found that in every country you can find always things that will appeal to you, or just don't appeal to you. I do consider that it's worth it that you go to Peru, because like anywhere, you can go anywhere and you can learn only by being there. Thank you for the question.
I would like to add, because this is an interesting question. about what are the cultural varieties in Peru, because as an observer, I was fascinated above all by the potatoes, because there are literally 350 types of potatoes, and they look different, they taste different. It's a very rich variety. And all of us had heard about the Irish potato famine. The Irish potato famine occurred because the Irish picked up only one variety of potato from Peru. And because that one variety died, the Irish had a famine, whereas Peru never had a famine because they had different varieties of potato. The second variety that you find in Peru is in different types of corn. Corn is, you have a dozen types of corn, and each one tastes different. And you can literally have a whole meal, and students go to school with a pat of corn in their thing. They don't take a sandwich to school. They just take corn because the corn tastes so nice and is so different. So there is a lot to Peru which is hidden from most of us because we haven't visited. And that's why the ambassador has very courteously said that all of you should visit Peru. And I can reinforce that that is something important. Without visiting Peru, you cannot judge Peru.
The next question up front.
Good evening. My name is Lisbeth McKeever, and as a Peruvian, I just want to highlight all the positive things that my country have done in the last decade.
Thank you.
Not all of them.
Anyway, a personal opinion, but as I was reading the fact sheet from Peru, I noticed that there is no any information on the energy contribution in the region. So I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit of the contribution that my country is doing in the energy environment in that region, particularly.
Energy.
Yes.
Energy and environment?
No.
Well,
No, particular energy. Any energy in the energy sector.
yes. What you know better than me than Peru, and thank you for your question, Elizabeth. Peru is a country which has natural energy. We're using the water resources for energy. We're using aeolic energy. And it's not our great wealthiness in Peru, the energy. It's one of the things that we have to take very good care of before we just destroyed that part of natural energy. We don't have a nuclear plant, for instance. We have just a research plant of nuclear, 20 kilowatts, megawatts, near to Lima. But we don't have nuclear energy plants like any other countries of the region, like Mexico or Chile, Argentina, and Brazil. What are we doing for the energy? Yes, we're doing. I wish I could speak in Spanish so I could be much more fluent. There's a great. We have natural gas, which is one of the largest. In the region, one of the largest reservoirs of natural gas that we have in the region. And we are also exporting that to neighboring countries that do not have that kind of energy. We have enough oil for national consumption. Sometimes we have to import, that depends. Now, there is a great challenge that we do have because there is a growing, and steadily growing situation of new industries coming to Peru. The government has created the Ministry of, besides the Ministry of Energy, created an environmental ministry, which takes care of these rules, modern rules, which are valid for the rest of the world. So the new factories that are being in Peru have special protection for that kind of things. The mining industry, which has been a very terrible and very painful issue on the social question, because the mines in Peru are everywhere. The mines are a very dirty thing. They really produce pollution water pollution, and environmental pollution. There were reaction of the peoples of that part of the mining, fighting against those companies who were, I mean, mainly from developed world, investing money in Peru. We need to continue that trend, but this government has taken some legislation which is very, I would say, even intelligent. The legislation now for mine investing countries is that if you are a Canadian company investing in Peru, you will have to abide by the Canadian environmental law to be in minings. If you are Chinese, you have to have exactly the same. So you have to, I mean, you have to protect your own. And then the second law, which is very important, is la ley de consulta previa, previous consultation, I would say. I don't know how to translate that.
Prior consultation.
Prior consultation. That's very important because before going and opening a new mine in this part of the Andes, what they do is they consult with these inhabitants of the region, which could be affected by the new investment. So I think that we're doing efforts. We don't have a magic stick that we can just do like this and develop from one day to the next. We still have a long way to go. But that we have taken very good steps, not this government, not the previous, not the other one. Along the last 20 years, I would say, Peru has been steadily coming. And it's not only because of we're saying that we're okay, that we're okay. I mean, all you have to go is Google the World Bank, and you will see figures and numbers.
May I ask a question of clarification? Did I understand you correctly that when a Canadian mining company comes to do business in Peru, they're required to abide by the same standards
Exactly.
that they abide by in Canada?
I'm talking mining, eh?
Mining, yeah. With respect to a Chinese mining company, the same principle would hold. They must abide by.
No, there are international standards that we request, which are everywhere.
So you're not talking about a concession of sovereignty?
No,
to
it's
the
not. It's not a bilateral issue. It's not a question of tick for tack.
Okay.
This problem occurred because of Mexico. It occurred because NAFTA was outsourcing everything from the United States to Mexico, and the outsourcing was being subjected to Mexican looser law regulations. And so what Peru has done is to say we will not follow that Mexican example. We will force these foreign companies to follow the laws as they exist in their companies, in their countries. Yeah. And they are very tight laws. And so this is a big advantage which Peru has in matters of investment, because you can criticize what is happening in the maquiladores in Mexico, but you cannot criticize Peru for anything similar happening in Peru as a result. So it's a wise decision on their part.
Good evening, Ambassador. Good evening, everyone. Well, as this forum is called Peru and its contribution to Latin America and the world, you may know that contributions are not only in terms of goods, money, or potatoes in this case, but also in terms of people. So right now, one of the main issues in U.S. is the immigration reform. So as we have in Latin America, deep issues with one of our main push factors are the gap between the rich and the poor. So in terms of migration, how is Peru, and especially how is the migration from Peru to United States? Well, you know, I know it's a brief forum, so what would you highlight as the main facts in migration right now with Peru?
I'm really not too much a follower of the specific point of migration, but I can tell you that the migrants who have migrated everywhere, doesn't matter where, have been changed since more than 10 years ago. The consular section of our embassies, I was a consul when I was in La Paz in 1980 to 83, and it was a big headache really, because we didn't have ways and means to control all that big flow. At that time, not too many people used to come to America, to the States. Now there are a large number of Peruvians living in the States, or large number of Peruvians living in Italy, in Spain mainly, and other countries of our own region, like in Venezuela. What the consular section of the embassies have is the council of the immigrants, that they have a voice and they have a saying in the doing of the consulates. As far as I understand, I tell you, I'm talking from a field which I have not seen for a long time. But we're trying to protect the rights of migrants everywhere. We consider that migration, it takes two to tango, right? Like we say, hace falta dos para bailar una buena marinera. It takes two to tango. And if we are sending migrants, I mean, Peruvians, let's use our country. Peruvians are moving to other parts of the world. There is also a compromise of that recipient country in favor and protecting the rights of those migrants. And that's where we're fighting, giving the fight, that's in the consular part of our job. The amount of, I can say, the capital, the money saved by immigrants who are sent to Peru and to many other countries. Remittances. Thank you very much. The remittances is so important. There are some countries, especially in Africa, but now in Latin America, a couple of them, who lives. The economy is based on that remittance that migrants send to Peru, to their capitals. I think that it's a problem that it's still on the pipeline, and we should take much more, I would say, focus on that situation, which should be. Of course, everybody is respectful of their laws in everywhere. If I invite someone to my house, I wouldn't let them to break my crystal things, because it's my house and it's my law. And if I don't like him breaking my crystal things, I invite him to leave by the main door, which they use to come in.
Hello, good evening. My name is Lee Sun. I'm the Master of Public Administration students. And I want to present two questions. One is about, you talk about the restaurant. As people know, Chinatown and the Chinese restaurant everywhere in the world. So I confused about never seen Peru restaurant in the United States or in China. What happened? Yeah, you're talking about the high quality about the potato and food seed.
I understand.
But why?
Well, as far as I know, there are no Peruvian Chinese restaurants here, but Miami is full of them.
There is.
Yeah.
There is? Okay, I lost.
A lot, yeah.
Main Street? Where, here?
Yeah,
good.
A lot.
In New York, I don't know any.
lot.
But Miami is full of Chinese chifas, full of chifas.
Peru? I see the Peru restaurant.
Then they have the roasted chicken too, pollo.
Yeah. But I see it's Mexico, it's not Peru.
No.
And also in my hometown, Guangzhou, the city near Hong Kong, and I never see the Peru restaurant. If something
Too much competition.
Yeah.
It's a business.
Okay, and the second question is about the investment environment, because right now the investment environment is going worse. So I think about maybe one day Chinese factory move to the Peru. What about right now the Peru salary, about the tax rate, about the government?
Yeah.
Chinese investment.
China is our main partner, commercial partner with Peru, actually. Actually, China is, but they are buying raw material, and we are getting. But on the other hand, Peru is becoming a large producer of brands. I invite you to go to any boutique in Madison Avenue, New York, and you'll find the big brands, and you turn out the label, and you will see made in Peru. We're producing in Peru, and it's not the maquila type like Ambassador mentioned. It's just contracts of, we produce very good cotton. The cotton is a high quality cotton that we have in Peru. And the big names, big brands are now using that cotton, and of course, alpaca wool. Alpaca wool is a first class wool, and it's being sold in all Europe, especially from Italians. They are buying, well, Italians are really magicians. They don't produce 1 grain of coffee, and they have the best coffee in the world. And now they're buying alpaca, and they're making garments and selling to the world. 10 times the price, of course. But thank you for your questions. Tell me, when is the chifa here?
I don't usually advertise, but
No? Okay.
no. I'll make an exception in the interest of cross-cultural understanding. In the town of Maywood, on Pleasant Avenue, there's a place called Uncle Paulie's. It's Peruvian, but they have a complete separate Chinese menu. I recommend the arroz chofa with the shrimp.
Arroz chaufa.
Oh, yeah.
Arroz chaufa. You have to pronounce correctly. Arroz chaufa.
We'll work on that. We'll work on that later. In the meantime, we're well out of time, so please join me in thanking the ambassadors for this.
Thank you very much.